Risk of Rain 2 Survivor Tier List. Before we jump into the list, there's a few things that I want to make note of. First of all, this is a generalist tier list. There are many different ways that you can play this game. You could do a single loop and jump straight into the final boss, you can loop your run over and over again, or you can be playing on Eclipse, which adds a bunch of different modifiers that make the game significantly harder. This list is taking into consideration all of those different types of playstyles and forming them into one singular tier list. Secondly, no two runs are exactly the same. Every run is going to have a different stage order, you're going to find different items, you're going to find different enemies, and you're going to find different printers. Characters who can thrive using a wide variety of items are going to find themselves placed a lot higher than characters who have very specific item needs. A good example of this is going to be something like bans. Bans are one of the most consistent items in the entire game, and if a character can consistently proc them right from the get-go, then they're going to be higher placed than characters who just can't. And lastly, I don't think tier lists should define how you play a game. I'd always recommend playing what's fun first over what's meta. Alright, so let's explain the list a little bit. Weak survivors are characters who you're going to struggle to have consistent games with. These characters are just significantly more item reliant than the others, or just don't have the damage output that the higher tiered characters have. Average survivors are characters who are able to get the damage out that they need, or they have skills that help them out in numerous ways, but their potential is just not as good as the characters higher placed. Strong characters are your above average survivors. If you play one of these characters, you're certainly going to feel it. There may be times where you have a few runs that are a little rough with them, but generally speaking, you're going to find yourself winning far more often than you'll find yourself losing. Overpowered characters are just that. These are characters who have either insane damage output or a crazy utility that makes them ridiculously strong. Now, you may still struggle on these characters, but that's going to be few and far between. And lastly, the Apex tier are the highest tiered characters in the game. These are characters who have just ridiculous utility or damage output, or have really high consistency. With all that out of the way, let's get into the list with our 17th placement and the worst survivor in Risk of Rain 2. The worst survivor in the game is undoubtedly Commando. Everything Commando does, other survivors can do better. His primary and secondary both aren't that good, his mobility's pretty mediocre, and his specials leave a lot to be desired. Yeah, frag grenades can proc bans from the get-go, but they're also one of the most inconsistent and difficult abilities to use in the game. Your main goal as Commando is going to be to get as much attack speed as you can, and make sure you get bleed. Bleed is basically the only thing that keeps Commando relevant. He is one of the better bleed proccers in the game, but other than that, there's basically nothing in his kit that stands out. It kinda sucks because Commando's actually pretty fun, and he's most people's first survivor, but as you play the game more, you'll quickly learn why he's the weakest. Coming in at number 16, we have Rex. Rex is one of the hardest survivors in the game to play. His entire gimmick is lowering his own health to deal damage, and in a roguelike where every enemy is trying to kill you, having you also try to kill you is a bit of a problem. Now, the damage that Rex does deal is actually pretty solid. With the low mobility that he has, and the fact that healing items are a necessity on him, make it really difficult for him to actually perform well. There's also basically no build variety with him either. All of his alternate skills are just worse than his default ones. Now, I think generally, Rex is a solid survivor on whatever mode you play, but it's worth noting that Eclipse absolutely cripples this guy. The Eclipse modifier that cuts your healing in half is already really rough on him, but the permanent damage applying to your self-inflicted damage is just unnecessary. Rex undoubtedly has the hardest Eclipse climb due to these modifiers just ruining him. Still, even if we took Eclipse completely out of this equation, I think the weak tier is just right where he belongs. Moving up to the average tier, we have MUL-T. MUL-T is a pretty solid character. He's able to have two equipments at once. You can run double nail gun on him, you can run double rebar on him, or you can even try his other combos like sawbar and single nail gun, or actually use the scrap launcher. But the things that hold MUL-T back, and the reason why he's just in average tier, is because of his mobility. His mobility skill isn't all that good, but what actually pains me is his acceleration stat. MUL-T actually has a different acceleration stat from other survivors, and this can make him really awkward to play. He just doesn't control the same as everyone else, and in my opinion, it feels way worse. Yeah, with the right setup, you can absolutely shred apart anything in front of you, but with godly items, basically any survivor can do that. Also, if you opt to run double nail gun on him, bans aren't the best pickup for you, whereas running double rebar, bans are kind of a necessity. Honestly, the items that you pick up and use on him are pretty much determined by what weapons you're actually using. I personally prefer double nail gun over rebar, but that's just because I really like the fast fire rate and the tankiness that power mode gives you. but I suppose the convenience of having 2 equipment is definitely something that makes double rebar actually feel good. Still, overall, MUL-T is a solid average unit. I don't think he has any incredible power to him, but he's certainly not weak. Mercenary is the next character in the average tier. Generally speaking, playing Mercenary is like trying your absolute hardest and receiving a kinda mediocre reward for it. He's one of the hardest survivors in the entire game. There are so many little intricacies to his kit and so many different types of tech that you can learn and perform, but even after you master all these various different techs and ways of attacking your enemies, what you show for it feels kind of mediocre when compared to what other survivors are capable of with significantly less effort. I do think this is the first placement on this list that might be met with some controversy. Hardcore Mercenary mains know he's really good, but there's also definitely people out there who think characters like Rex and MUL-T are better than him. But for me, I think this placement feels the most correct. He's got solid damage output, decent AoE, not super good single target, but his kit does have built-in iframes and a bonus double jump right from the get-go. He feels really good to play, he's extremely fluid in all of his movements, and his starting mobility is some of the best in the game, but there really are just other characters that beat him out in the damage department. And that's kind of the only reason why he's down here. If he just had a little more damage, I could definitely see him being in the strong tier. He's also the first melee survivor we're talking about here, and melee survivors already have a pretty big negative of, well, needing to be in melee range to actually deal damage. There are other melee survivors on this list who are significantly higher than Mercenary because their damage numbers are just that much better. Still, if you're really good at him and know how to play him extremely well, then I could totally see him being in strong tier, and by extension, if you're really bad at him, then he might be weak in your eyes. So for now, average is where I'm leaving him. Huntress is the last character in the average tier. She's pretty similar to Mercenary as just not having enough damage to really keep up with other survivors. Doesn't help the fact that her default special, Arrow Rain, is one of the worst specials in the game. The reason why I'm going to put her above Mercenary is because her mobility is on par, if not better than his, while having range in her kit. When this game first came out, Huntress was kind of the glass cannon character. She always had the lowest amount of health but the highest mobility in the game. That's changed since then, and now a lot of characters can do her job but just significantly better. The low health isn't that much of a negative due to just how good Huntress's mobility is. I mean, triple blinks are incredible for dodging attacks so long as you're timing them well, and the damage you deal is really easy because her primary and secondary fires both home, but just like Mercenary, she simply doesn't have the damage numbers to keep up with the rest of the roster. I feel really bad putting her in average tier because she was my favorite survivor for the longest time, but this tier just feels right for her. Starting off on the strong tier, we have the Captain. Right off the bat, Captain has one of the best primaries in the entire game. His shotgun has ridiculously high DPS, and if you hold it down, it's got a shocking amount of range too. As a consequence for this, however, his secondary is one of the worst in the game. His secondary is just a little taser that stuns one enemy for like 6 seconds, and doesn't even count as a debuff for some reason. Captain also has some of the coolest specials in the game. The hacking and shocking beacons are both really good, and the healing and resupply beacons can even have some use depending on who you're with. But getting those early stage shrines for free, or even getting the stage 4 legendary chests for free, just feels really nice. His utility is also pretty crazy. The orbital strikes that he has by default are solid, but Diablo Strike can just delete entire areas from the game. Diablo Strike is the single strongest attack in the entire game, with a 40,000% damage. Yeah, it takes 20 seconds to actually land. It has a 40-second cooldown. With the right setups, you can skip Phase 1 Mithrix with this thing, or you can start a teleporter event, plop it on the boss, and just ignore the boss, and watch him die 20 seconds later. Okay, so he has really good damage, really good utility. What's the issue? Well, he has no mobility. He's one of the very few characters in this game with straight up zero mobility skills. You need movement items on him. Now, he's not completely dead in the water, though. He does have a passive item that he spawns with called Defense Microbots. These shoot down any projectiles coming near him, and this passive is based on his attack speed. Any drones he buys also inherits this passive, so if you have a drone army with him, you're basically not going to be hit by any projectiles. And if you have that drone army and happen to come across drone men, well, you've basically just won the game. I think there's a serious step up in power and utility from the Huntress to the Captain, hence why he's a whole tier above her. But that complete lack of mobility is why he's at the bottom of strong. Our second survivor to be included in the strong tier is Chef. Now, I'm gonna keep it real, this is probably my least confident placement, mainly because Chef is not a survivor that I find myself playing very often, but I believe I've played him enough to at least find a fairly good place for him, and that's right here in strong. What makes Chef really good is equipping Icebox. Freeze is the best debuff in the entire game. It makes it so that the enemy is completely still, can't attack you at all, and will be executed below 25% health. This freeze debuff even works on Mithrix, and the fact that Chef has access to it immediately makes him better than most other survivors with a similar damage output to him. Yes, Chef is an amazing ability that can boost Icebox even further, and both of his mobility skills are really good. The roll can send you halfway across the map, and the oil spill one can send you halfway up the map. His primary fire damage is also pretty solid. The cleavers don't do too much on their own, but on the return, they deal double damage and have a greatly increased proc coefficiency, meaning items like bleed will proc significantly more on the rebound. He also has a passive when applying debuffs that grant him healing. Overall, Chef is a really strong survivor and probably the first one we're talking about who really doesn't have a weakness. Just make sure you pick up a few backup mags so you can spam that icebox. The next character in the strong tier list is going to be the Heretic. Now, some people probably wouldn't even consider Heretic a survivor. You can't pick her from the start. Instead, you can only play her after getting the heresy items. But she's on the tier list, so I gotta rank her. Now, the main reason for Heretic being placed so high is not actually because of her damage output or anything. I find Heretic's damage output to be kind of alright. Visions of Heresy was never a fun item for me personally, but I do love the ruin skill provided by Hooks of Heresy, and she's got that. But no, the reason why Heretic is so high up here is because of her stats. Heretic has the highest base HP in the entire game by quite a bit. She also has the highest damage scaling in the game, and moves even faster than everybody, and also has like 3 jumps. So the ridiculous base damage and base health that Heretic has is really the main reason why she's here. Her only real negative is having, well, negative health regen. You literally need healing on this character in order to survive. If you don't have enough healing, you will eventually just die. But if you play it right and have a few healing items, or just grab Transcendence if you're boring, then you'll basically never die. And for that, I gotta put Heretic up here in strong. Coming up next in the strong tier, we have Artificer. Artificer has a lot of good in her kit, mainly through the freeze effects that she can apply with either the Icicle Sphere or the Freeze Wall. As I previously stated in the Chef segment, Freeze is the best debuff in the entire game, and the fact that Artificer has 2 ways to apply it immediately makes her good. But it's not just Freeze, her primary shoots fireballs that inflict a fire damage over time effect. If you decide not to take the Icicle Sphere, you can actually take Nano Bomb, which is a crazy good AoE tool, and she has the best horizontal mobility in the game with Ion Surge. Honestly, the only weak part of her kit is Flamethrower. Flamethrower is a fun skill, but you kinda need ignition tanks for its damage to actually be worth it. And even then, I think the utility provided by Ion Surge just surpasses it. Artificer also has a passive hover that she can do, and this can help you get some horizontal mobility, but it's not really fast. Still, she has a ton of power in her kit, and you can spend basically the entire time playing her up in the sky and not worry about any of the enemies on the ground below you. Also, with just a couple backup mags and maybe a Purity, you can literally stun lock the final boss in place and just kill him. Overall, Artificer has barely any weaknesses in her entire kit. She's a really versatile survivor. Might take a bit of getting used to playing her, especially with her cooldown based gameplay, but I think the strong tier is a perfect place for her. Moving up, we have what is likely to be the most controversial placement on the list, but one I stand by. Acrid is here right near the top of the strong tier. Now, I know what you're saying. Acrid's poison does infinite damage. Poison is the best skill in the game. Acrid doesn't even need items to kill his enemies. All very good points. However, poison does have a few things holding it back. First of all, poison can never actually kill an enemy. You need to deal the finishing blow. And secondly, against stronger enemies, like bosses, poison can take quite a while to chip them down. Poison also can't proc anything, but honestly, if it could, it'd be way too broken. Generally speaking, I find poison to be best against all the little enemies while you focus your actual attacks on the boss. And there's where the problem arises. Poison is really good, and Acrid's abilities that proc poison are really good. But Acrid's own personal damage, completely disregarding poison, is actually pretty bad. Poison can help mitigate a lot of this, but without decent on-kill items like gasoline or whisk bottles, you'll have trouble finishing off a lot of enemies. Then you'll have to get right up in the enemy's faces to actually finish them off, which is not a position you want to be in very often. And when we're making a tier list discussing the single most powerful survivor, I think a one-trick pony like Acrid is not deserving of a top spot. But this is in no way me calling Acrid weak. He's still a really strong survivor. I mean, he's near the top of strong for a reason. I do also want to briefly mention the fact that Acrid basically doesn't have alternate skills. If you pick up Ravenous Bite, you're losing a lot of your range. Frenzied Leap doesn't poison, unlike Caustic Leap, and Blight is objectively worse than poison. Like I said, this might be a controversial placement, but I think relying on a damage over time effect to be your best damage is not the best thing you'd want in a survivor. Overall, I think this placement just kinda fits. I know it's wild to have theoretically infinite damage not even in the overpowered tier, but I've played Acrid quite a bit, and I've seen what the other survivors above him are capable of. The frontrunner for the strong tier is our local cowboy, Bandit. His shotgun can deal some really good close range damage and even solid medium range damage. And his passive, Backstab, lets him have guaranteed crits right from stage 1. Now if you've played Risk of Rain 2 a lot, you'll know that the early stages are the most important part of your run, and having guaranteed crits right out the get-go is huge. It also flows super well into his smoke bomb utility, allowing him to de-aggro enemies nearby and get right behind him for those juicy crits. His passive also synergizes great with a ton of different items. Laser Scope and Harvester's Scythe are some obvious ones, but the Backstab actually lets you pick up Lost Seer's lenses and still be able to crit while having the chance of instant kill. Now all of this is amazing, but it isn't why he's at the top of strong. What makes the Bandit truly powerful is his special. Lights Out is solid, dealing decent damage and resetting your skill cooldowns, but Desperado is pretty insane. Desperado starts by dealing 600% damage, and every enemy you kill with it, you get a token. Each of those tokens increase the damage by 10%. So if you kill 10 enemies, you are dealing double damage with this attack. On most stages, I find myself stacking between 15 and 30 of these, and you feel the damage. Being able to crit with it right off the get-go is also amazing. Even on stage 1, I found myself one-shotting bosses with this ability. It's that good. Desperado is probably one of the only abilities in actual contention for best ability in the game, and it just fits so well for Bandit's kit. Honestly, the main reason why I have him up here at the top of strong is because his burst fire shotgun's great, his utility works really well with Backstab, and Desperado is just a busted skill. The only thing keeping him from entering the overpowered tier is because those characters have even wilder abilities than him. And we're going to see that now with the least overpowered of the overpowereds, the character who can literally triple every item in the game. Engineer is our first character in the overpowered tier, and it is almost exclusively because of his turrets. The Engi's turrets inherit every item that he has, and this effectively triples all of your items. The potential that this man has is basically limitless, and you can get to the point where you don't even need to play the game to win. Now, the reason why he's at the bottom of overpowered and not any higher is because his other skills, besides the turrets, aren't actually that good. His primary fire can deal damage, I guess, and his secondary landmines are okay. For his utility, the bubble has some use, but generally speaking, the harpoons are what you want to pick. Honestly, the harpoons actually deal really solid damage, and if you get a pocket ICBM, you're going to be hitting really hard with them. So I recommend always taking harpoons over bubble. But because of his lacking primary and secondary, and also the fact that he has no mobility skill, period, I can't put Engineer any higher than the bottom of overpowered. I was originally going to put him at the top of strong, but man, the turrets are just that good. You can pick up something like an Elusive Antlers on him, and when you place the turrets, you get more orbs to spawn. You can grab Tri-Tip Daggers, and both of your turrets will be able to proc bleed, keeping that chain going. You can pick up a Dio's Bear and give your turret an extra life. You can grab a Lysate Cell and have a third turret at your disposal, effectively quadrupling every item. And don't even get me started on Bungus turrets. That's probably the most consistent healing in the entire game. Due to the sheer potential that Engineer's turrets have, and the fact that you can argue that every single item in the game is technically better in his hands as opposed to other characters, due to his turrets actually inheriting them, Engineer places himself firmly in the overpowered tier. He can be really difficult to get used to, especially with the whole no mobility thing, but his power cannot be understated. The next character in the overpowered tier is the Void Fiend. This is where we start a trend of the DLC characters being really good. Void Fiend's gimmick is swapping between his non-corrupted and corrupted form. His non-corrupted form has much better range and healing capabilities, whereas his corrupted form goes all in on damage. Both of these forms, when used in their proper scenarios, are ridiculously powerful. The range Void Fiend has in his standard form is completely cross-map. whereas his primary fire in his corrupted form is significantly closer range, but also provides some of the highest DPS in the entire game. The only difficult thing Void Fiend really has in his kit is making sure to control your corrupted resource meter properly. You don't want to transform when you need to attack an enemy from far away, and you want to hasten your transformation when there's a boss enemy right in front of you. This jumbling between his two forms is really the only difficulty I've ever had with Void Fiend. That and his non-corrupt utility's kind of bad, I guess. It's a vertical mobility skill instead of horizontal, which is usually worse, but it does have the benefit of cleansing all debuffs, which is great. Void Fiend also has the gimmick of picking up void items to gain more percentage in his corrupted meter, and if you hit 25% with this, you can just spam his healing and constantly have it off cooldown. It's really good. You do want to avoid picking up too many void items. I recommend stopping at around 30%. Any higher than that and it gets a little tough to maintain, but those weaknesses are such small nitpicks that it doesn't even matter. Attack speed is amazing in his non-corrupt form. Bleed is fantastic in his corrupted form. He's one of the only characters in the game that has something special with crit, allowing him to corrupt faster. And aside from not wanting to pick up too many void items, there's basically no bad item on this guy. His secondary fire is also an extremely consistent and powerful band proc, so he's even got that going for him. Honestly, there's basically nothing wrong with his kit. He has some incredible damage potential, really good mobility, fantastic survivability, and depending on what form you're in, you're able to attack enemies from either across the map or right in front of you with ease. I just can't see myself placing him lower than any of the previously discussed survivors. This spot is perfect for him. Seeker is up next, and I know what you're going to say. Why is she not an Apex? She can literally revive herself every stage. And to that I say, if the res is necessary, then she is not good. Look, this entire segment is probably just going to be talking about Seeker's revive, so let's just speed run the rest of her kit. Her normal attacks are solid at medium range. The Unseen Hand and the orbs that float around you are both pretty good. Orbs are usually better, they have a higher DPS, and they generate barrier, which gives Seeker some more survivability, but Unseen Hand can proc bans. Both of her mobility skills are some of the best in the game. Sojourn can last basically forever, as long as you have enough damage negation and healing to keep up with it, whereas her little tornado ability can send her across the map about as fast as Loader can go. It's even got some nice crowd control by sucking the enemies into the tornado. Lastly, Meditate and the Palm Attack are going to completely change how you play this character. If you choose to use the Palm Blast, first off, you're cool. Second off, it's some solid infinite piercing damage that can go through walls and build up your passive. Whereas if you use Meditate, you have to play a little minigame, which will generate you barrier and slowly build up your passive. When you maximize out that passive, that is when you get the revive. But you can only get the revive if you use Meditate. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's talk about the revive now. Meditate's revive can be used to instantly bring an ally back to life, or it will automatically revive you if you fall while the passive is active. Now, this might be a bit of a shock, but I don't think having a revive every stage makes Seeker insanely busted or groundbreaking. Her damage is pretty solid, her mobility is kind of ridiculous, and the utility that she provides is great, but the revive does not send her over the edge for me. If you're playing a run where you need to revive every single stage just to keep going, then maybe you're not gonna win that run anyway. If you seriously find yourself relying on the Seeker res constantly, then you should probably consider playing on a lower difficulty or learning the game more before diving into it. Honestly, I see the revive as more of a convenience in case you want to just play stupid or test silly things, and less a mechanic that I actually want to work around when I'm playing Seeker. Actually, more often than not, I find myself using the revive when I'm in a co-op game with friends who are not quite as experienced with the game as me, but I still want to play with them and help them along. Honestly, I could probably make an entire video talking about just the Seeker res. I might even do just that. But my overall opinion of it is, if you need to rely on it, then either Seeker does not have the power that she needs to be defined as an Apex character, or you are playing at too hard of a difficulty and need to tone it back a little. It's a similar argument to Dio's Bear. Would you rather have a Dio's best friend to revive you from a death, or have a red item that could help prevent that death in the first place? For me personally, I'd much rather use Palm Blast because I find it to be a more fun and unique ability than Meditate, and I also find Palm Blast to be a significantly more powerful ability for my overall damage output. Still, I can't just ignore the fact that Seeker has a revive. I mean, she's in overpowered for a reason. But if she didn't have that revive, she'd still be in a pretty similar place. I'd probably put her basically on par with Engineer. Both have a lot of potential, and Seeker has so much utility in her kit, regardless of the revive, that she definitely deserves to be up here. This is probably going to be my hottest take in this entire list, so I'm curious what you guys think. Anyway, let's move on to our final overpowered character. Railgunner has one thing going for her. Damage. She doesn't have crazy mobility, she doesn't have insane survivability, but she does have damage. A lot of damage. Like, way too much fucking damage. What were they thinking with this? 1000% damage with guaranteed crits, infinite range, no damage fall off, and a little minigame that you could do that increases it even more? What were they thinking? Every single one of Railgunner's attacks does just a stupid amount of damage. If we ignore the little smart tracer rounds, which do 100% damage per shot, her weakest attack is the marksman rifle that does 400% damage and can guarantee crit. Yeah, her weakest attack can proc bans. But it's only up from there. Her default primary hits for 1000%. But you play a little reload minigame, and if you succeed at that reload minigame, which is really easy to succeed at it, you now deal 1500% damage. And then she has Cryocharge, which fires a piercing laser doing 2000% damage and freezing the enemy. You know, the best debuff in the game. It even works on Mithrix, cause why not? But then there's also the Supercharged Railgun, which does 4000% damage, the second hardest hitting attack in the entire game. The only thing that does more damage than Supercharge is Captain's Diablo Strike that takes 20 seconds to land. Oh, and every single one of these attacks can have their damage doubled by hitting a crit, cause she can crit every enemy in the game right from the get-go. No lens makers needed or nothing. All you need to do is hit your shots. And that's where the problems arise. If you can't hit your shots on Railgunner, you're going to have a hard time dealing good damage with her. But if you're some crazy FPS player and you hit all of your shots, then you will have no trouble absolutely decimating this game. When I made my guide video, Railgunner was the only character who I didn't actually put a difficulty for, and that's because the difficulty really does rely on you. But I implore you to go out there and practice your Railgunner so you can see why all of this is so crazy to me. It's like, yeah, Commando's best attack in the game, the frag grenade, with the most precise placement, which is already hard to get, does half the damage that a single Railgunner shot does if she doesn't crit. It's a completely ridiculous unbalance of power, which is why it's wild that I don't even have her in the Apex tier of this game. You see, despite all of this immeasurable strength, Railgunner does have issues. They're small issues, but they're still issues. Mobility is not something that Railgunner possesses a lot of, and her mobility skill is one of the hardest to get used to. You throw down a little landmine that knocks you and any enemies away. This is all you got. You need to bounce yourself away from the enemies with a timed landmine. Now you do have 2 charges of these, and only one landmine can exist at a time, so if you throw both of them down really quickly, you'll instantly detonate the first one, allowing you to get out of sticky situations right away. But generally speaking, the landmines as a traditional mobility tool are kind of inconvenient and rough to use. There's so many intricacies to them, but that's not something every player is just gonna wind up knowing. She also can only crit if she hits weak points, meaning that if you don't hit the weak point, you're just never going to be able to crit. And you can't just pick up lens makers to fix that. She converts all crit rate into crit damage, with horrible efficiency, mind you. One lens maker glasses is only a 5% damage boost on her, whereas a watch is 20 and a crowbar is 75. But it doesn't really matter because every item in the game procs based off of the attack that hit it. So if you land a crit and proc a band from that crit, your band will also be dealing crit damage. The only item in the game that's an exception to this, as far as I'm aware, is Charged Perforator, which has its own crit rate based off of the character, and because Railgunner converts crit rate into damage, you can never have your Charged Perforator crit on her. I don't know why it's coded like that, probably just an oversight, but yeah, I guess Charged Perforator isn't an S tier item on her. Oh no. Railgunner, however, is the best band user in the entire game. Getting a critical hit with a supercharge is going to deal 8000% damage, so you know that band proc is going to instantly wipe out whatever you just hit. I swear I have one-shot more enemies on Railgunner than any other survivor in this entire game. She is strictly made to eviscerate everything. But unfortunately, the slightly lacking mobility and the fact that the other 2 characters are about as ridiculous in the damage department while making up for what Railgunner lacks, I have to put Railgunner in the overpowered tier. She's the top of overpowered tier, but she's still just overpowered. Oh no, how tragic. Our first Apex character and the second strongest survivor in Risk of Rain 2 is the Loader. Let's see what Loader's got. Her charge gauntlet has some of the highest damage in the entire game, infinitely pierces enemies, and even scales based off of your acceleration. She can grapple across the entire map in only a few seconds with literally 0 items. She has a pylon that she can deploy to grapple from wherever she wants, and she's probably the second strongest band user in the entire game. She's essentially a Railgunner, but you give up a tiny bit of the damage and, well, basically all of the range for some obscene mobility. Oh, and she also has fall damage immunity and gains barrier on her attacks, which really helps in the survivability department. So yeah, she's got amazing survivability, incredible damage, and ridiculous mobility. What's wrong with her? Well, basically nothing. That's why she's an Apex. I guess you could argue that she doesn't have any range, but she doesn't really need it. The pylon is strong enough to deal with hordes of wisps on its own, and if there are some enemies up in your face and your gauntlet is off cooldown, her normal attack is a decent damaging combo. But the vast majority of her damage is going to come from those rocket punches. This is what's going to be one-shotting your bosses. This is what's going to be instantly wiping hordes. This is what's going to be doing basically everything. Also, I'm sorry I'm a sinner and using the Thunder Gauntlet in this gameplay footage. Charge Gauntlet is better. It's objectively better, but I just kind of like the convenience of Thunder Gauntlet. Even if Charge Gauntlet is objectively better, Thunder Gauntlet is still pretty dang solid, and it's a lot more comfortable to use, at least for me. Honestly, there's basically nothing I can say wrong with her. She's great with most items in the game. Yeah, she might not be the best bleed stacker in the game, but she more than makes up for that with how good she uses bands. Her mobility is incredibly fun and incredibly useful, combined with the fall damage immunity, which lets you get away with going wherever you want. It also lets you completely ignore an eclipse modifier. And basically all of her attacks give her bonus barrier that she, truth be told, doesn't need, but certainly appreciates having. She's been an Apex level character since she came out. She's always been touted as the strongest survivor in the game, but as Seeker of the Storm came out, and more importantly, had every survivor reworked, there's one character that I just see as a little stronger than Loader. And that character is, of course, the False Sun. False Sun really has everything you could possibly want in a survivor. His mobility is above average, his damage is some of the best in the game, and he has multiple different forms of utility that are empowered by his entire kit. First off, his melee attacks are really strong. The Club Slam is some amazing early game AoE, and even in the late game, it still hits like a truck. Both of his secondary fires are incredible. Lunar Spikes and the Lunar Stakes both apply the Lunar Ruin debuff, which is, in my opinion, the second best debuff in the entire game. What Lunar Ruin does is it makes the enemy take 10% increased damage from all sources per stack. It's not that hard to get a bunch of stacks of this, and with only 10 stacks, all damage sources are dealing double damage. This includes your allies. Lunar Ruin also has a little hidden mechanic where it counts as 2 debuffs, so with it you're already halfway to a death mark. Both of his utilities are really good. Meridian's Will just teleports you and quadruples your growth effects. And Step of the Brothers is an omnidirectional movement ability with 2 charges. The charge laser is pretty solid. It's a rapid hitting attack. It can work well with shrimp and even bleed. Or you can take the laser burst, which is a powerful piercing laser that instantly fires and will also refill half of your spikes or stakes. I personally love running this with the lunar stakes. It can cause you to just rack up obscene amounts of damage. Now, all of this would already put False Sun in the overpowered tier, but what really pushes him to be that Apex character is the growth mechanic. As you increase your base health, you'll get more growth stacks. You can increase your base health off of items like Infusion, or Bison Steak, or any pearls that you get from cleansing pools, or even the new prayer beads. All of these items are S tier on this guy just because of how strong growth is. Finding a Bison Steak printer on him is basically your ticket to a free win. And what the growth stacks actually do is based on how many lunar spikes or stakes you have in your inventory. When you have a bunch of lunar spikes, you get increased armor and attack speed, meaning you can be right up in enemies' faces and not take any damage. And after you spend all of your lunar spikes, you get increased movement speed and health regen, which can allow you to retreat from any dangerous situation and recover very quickly. But honestly, False Sun's health scaling and armor scaling are so good that I basically never worry about that. Instead, what growth winds up being for me is just more stacks of my secondary and special. And this is why I believe False Sun to be the strongest survivor. It doesn't matter what game mode you're playing, he will always be growing at an accelerated rate compared to other survivors due to the growth mechanic. Heck, with the growth mechanic, even in Eclipse, False Sun can get so powerful that the permanent damage from Eclipse 8 just doesn't work on him anymore. He also makes a ton of otherwise poor items exceptional, Like I said, Bison Steak is one of his best items in the entire game. Same goes for Infusion. These are items that are commonly scrapped by other survivors, but on False Sun, they are a gold mine. In fact, aside from traditionally bad items like War Banner, I can't think of a single thing that is bad on him. He makes great use of all of the damaging items. With watches, you don't find yourself getting to low health on him basically ever. He's amazing with the Focus Crystal due to his Club Slam, and Crowbar, AP rounds, and Crit are really good on him as they are on most survivors. So there you have it, that's the list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. But truth be told, I think this is a fairly agreeable list. Some people are definitely going to argue a few spots shifting, but I think most people can at least generally agree with what I have here. Keep in mind that this is more of a general list for all game modes, whether you're doing a single loop, multiple loops, or even Eclipse. And also remember that no two runs are the same, and you can have wildly different outcomes on whatever character you wind up picking. Also, there's a new DLC coming out in a little over a month from now, so after I get my hands on that and thoroughly play the new survivors, I'll make sure to come back to this list and revise it. Heck, there might be some new items in the Allied Collective DLC that bump up some of these other characters. I'm fully expecting Captain to be a better character after Allied Collective, just because of all the new drone stuff. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. I know there's a bunch of Risk of Rain tier lists out there already, but I wanted to take my own swing at it, and I'm curious what you all think. I've got more Risk of Rain content planned, and I'm definitely going to be playing a lot once Allied Collective drops, so if you're interested in seeing that, then make sure you subscribe. Till next time.